Hi there, it's me again. So when I discussed Koniski's chapter in a previous video, I mentioned that environmental justice doesn't necessarily mean environmental racism. Sometimes communities that are overburdened by environmental problems are not necessarily of a certain race or socioeconomic status. However, I also mentioned that there are high correlations between these variables. So in many cases, in a majority of cases, in fact, the communities that are most negatively affected by the negative environmental impacts of private and public activities tend to be communities of color. How do I know this? Well, it's pretty easy to prove actually, and that's what I'll do in this video. I will do two things here. First, I'm going to show you this map of the United States that it's truly amazing. In this map, there is one dot for every human being living in the United States according to the 2010 census. So if you zoom in or out, you can get to specific cities. So for instance, I'm going to get to Columbus right here. Let me add the map labels. So we have Columbus here. And the other thing that you're going to see that is quite interesting here is that each dot is colored by the race of the person, right? So blue dots are white people, green dots are black people, red dots are Asian Americans, and orange are Hispanics. And so you can see already that there are certain patterns of racial segregation, the way people live, right? The interesting thing is that you'll see these patterns of segregation across the United States in different cities, right? So if you go to for instance, let's see, Detroit, we know that it's one of the most highly segregated cities in the US. You'll see that African Americans tend to live in certain portions of the city. Other portions are whiter. There's a section here which is mostly Hispanic. I'll show you another example of a very highly segregated city in the US, which is the city of Milwaukee in Wisconsin. And you'll see this like crazy vortex where African Americans tend to live. It's pretty noticeable, right? This area of town. Then you have a whole other area, which is the third ward, where Hispanics tend to congregate. Then the rest of the city tends to be white. So anyways, you'll see these big patterns of racial segregation across the major cities of the United States. You have Chicago, where we know that the southern portion of the city is mostly African American. You'll see that right there. So this is a really interesting map because, it contains so much information. Then the second map that I want to show you, it's here on the right. And this is basically a website called the Environmental Justice Screen Tool. And this is actually one of the good things that came out of the Environmental Justice 2014 plan that the Obama administration put together. With this tool, what you can do is pick a given geographic location and generate a report about a number of environmental indicators that affect the population in the area that you pick. For instance, let's say that I pick Columbus, right? And I can generate a report. And the way I do that is by selecting location. So I can do this. Roughly the city of Columbus. I'm getting a little bit of other cities too. And then you can generate this printable standard report, which takes a few seconds to generate, but hopefully this is going to do it. Sometime the system crashes. In this case, we did it. And you'll see that there are a number of indicators here that are associated with environmental justice. Particularly, we're talking about 11 different environmental indicators that are associated with environmental justice. These were selected by the EPA because they have a demonstrated adverse impact on human health. For instance, let's see, here we have the Environmental Justice Index for Superfund proximity. Not sure you all know what a Superfund site is. Let me quickly explain it to you. Back in 1980, Congress passed this act called the Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, CERCLA, which is also known as Superfund. And what CERCLA does is it allows the EPA to identify contaminated sites in the country that require remediation because they pose danger to human health. And these sites are called Superfund sites. Maybe there was a chemical company producing something there, or this is an area where debris from construction sites were dumped in an unsafe manner, etc. So this particular indicator would tell you on average how close to Superfund sites a population is. In this case, we're talking about the whole population in Columbus. Anyway, then what you will see is that the report that is produced ranks the area that you select and compares it to the scores for the indicators at the state level, the EPA region where that area is. In this case, Columbus is in EPA region 5, and the country level. And it generates percentile scores for each one of those comparison groups. And so when the percentile score is higher, it basically means that the population that you selected is in trouble, right? So something like this, the index for Superfund proximity, you'll see that it's very high for Columbus. And that's probably because there are Superfund sites that have been identified, whereas in the state in general, there is less on average, and the same thing in the EPA region, and the same thing in the United States. So the higher the scores, the worse off you are, right? And by the way, you can see the individual scores for each one of these indicators here, and then how they compare to the different comparison groups. Now, the beauty of this tool is that you can select a smaller area. So what I'll do quickly here is, based on the dot map that I showed you before, produce two reports. One for the area in Columbus where African Americans tend to cluster, and one for a different area where the population is mostly white. So how would we do that? Let's see. Here's Columbus. I'm just going to zoom in, and basically we know that African Americans tend to concentrate in this area here, east of 71, all the way to the downtown area. And then on the other side of 71, we have Grandview Heights, for instance, which is mostly white. And let's see what happens, right? So I'm going to generate a report in this area here where it seems African Americans tend to cluster a little bit more. I think this is roughly be something like this. Okay, so this area now roughly compares to this area here, right? Where you see a lot of green dots. I'm going to generate the report. It's generating the report, and we'll see what scores we get for this area of Columbus where mostly we have African Americans living there. And we see that these numbers are quite high, right? So we are in the 90s for pretty much everything except for wastewater discharge indicator, which is still pretty high. So we've done that for this portion of town that is mostly African Americans, and that community, again, based on environmental justice indicators, is not doing too well. You can check, by the way, which each indicator means if you get to this additional information site here. But there's a lot of information. So there's a few indicators that are about air toxicity, or how safe the air is. And of course, the higher the particulate matter in the air, the higher the ozone, the higher the diesel particulate matter, the worse the air is, and the more troublesome the situation, right? There's respiratory hazard index, air toxics, cancer risk. All these things are bad for you. Lead paint, which, as we know, when kids consume it, it leads to problems of development. And so, these are very bad numbers. Now we can do the same for the white population. So let's see, how would we do that? So first we're going to take this out. And like I said before, there's a area of Columbus, Grandview Heights, that is mostly white. So let's see, I have to roughly pick this area here. All right, let's generate the report and see what happens. Okay, now all of the sudden, these values had gone down considerably, and we are in the less than 50 value for the percentile in the state, in the EPA region, and in the US across all 11 indicators that the EPA identifies as indicators of environmental justice, right? So now you see these like very, very, very different values and scores for African Americans and for a portion of the white population in Columbus, in one of the better off neighborhoods that we have in town. So these are the types of findings that you're going to get if you do an analysis of this sort across the United States in general. Now, in order to say that race is a good indicator for predicting differences in environmental justice across the nation, we would need to do these types of analysis in many places, right? And obviously, this is beyond the scope of this video. So I encourage you to try it a different city on your own if you want, or different portions of Columbus, and do a comparative analysis to see if you see similar or different patterns. You could actually pick an area that is mostly Hispanic, compare it to African Americans, or Hispanics compared to white areas. And I'll share the links to both the map and the environmental justice tool below this video, so you can do it if you feel like doing it yourself. Okay, that's it for this one, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks.